Beneficent, the Merciful, may his peace and blessings be upon our Holy Prophet Muhammad and also upon his progeny. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to The Convertsation, the program that discusses the daily challenges faced by converts to the religion of Islam, as well as strategies for dealing with these challenges and for community integration, and that's sort of the topic that we left off on, which was the topic of identity, which I guess is going to be an ongoing theme throughout essentially all of the episodes, I think. It would be hard to... Yeah, absolutely. But in particular, we'd been talking about, in more specific ways, identity in terms of the way that our schedule or use of time changes after conversion, as well as different types of hobbies, habits, other things like that, some of which maybe we need to change, and other ones we may change too aggressively without really needing to.
Sure. Sure.
And sometimes are in a hurry to give up things that may seem like even sometimes superficial parts of our identity that I think at times reach a lot deeper. One of the things that we wanted to discuss in the last episode was the issue of converts coming from troubled backgrounds. I've got some more things I'm going to throw at you after that if we finish with that. But I think actually that even when we talk about the idea of converts with troubled backgrounds, that there's, I think there's actually an assumption that most converts have troubled backgrounds. And maybe in part, at least in the US, that has something to do with like the Malcolm X movie or other things, but that, which I love. But I mean, the idea seems to be...
Spike Lee's a good director.
It's a great film. And there's like 2 episodes now we've had name dropped Spike Lee, I think, too. But I think what this sort of promulgates is this idea that a lot of people come to the religion because they're fleeing a troubled background or whatever else. And granted, a lot of people do actually convert in prison, but even in that sense, a lot of people convert to Christianity in prison as well.
Absolutely, it's quite a normal phenomenon when you're in prison to seek out God, I think. And that search can sometimes take you in the wrong direction, as we see from the fact that most of the guys who convert to even Islam in prison do not convert to Shiism.
Yeah, well, that's true, unfortunately, at least in...
And this is a topic for another day. This is not a polemical show, but I will just mention this. I do think that it is quite telling that many people who are in prison with these criminal kind of gangster mentalities would choose a distorted form of Islam in which the hero of the religion is the criminal gangster sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to mention this, that seems to really be something that is both emulated inside and towards other Shia inmates as well, by the way. And I hear about this regularly with regard to attacks on them or other things like that.
Sure.
But in fact, I guess, yeah, we should probably devote some separate episodes to dealing with prison issues alone. But that certainly people come with troubled backgrounds, but there seems to be, on the one hand, an assumption, maybe with converts, that what was it in your life, what went wrong, that you accepted Islam? Which is funny, because it's the same question you get asked by relatives as well. Sometimes parents may be sort of like, where did we go wrong, this kind of thing. But on the other hand, if you do come from a troubled background, within the community that you're converting into, unfortunately, there may also be some judgments attached to that.
Sure. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. In regards to this topic, I think it is one which is of crucial importance to be discussed, and I believe it is one that just needs to be, again, I use this expression quite a lot on this show, but I believe instead of beating around the bush and glossing over the problem, we need to grab the bull by the horns.
Yeah.
And I believe that some people would say that you're making a mountain out of a molehill with this issue, but I genuinely believe that when people say that, what they would want us to do instead is to merely gloss the mountain over and pretend it's not there. Whereas in reality, there is some real issues in the way that converts, particularly converts of troubled backgrounds, are treated. And, well, allow me to make clear from the outset that neither myself nor Shaikh Daniel converted in prison. Neither of us have...
That you know of.
Well, unless you've been lying to us all this time, Shaikh Daniel, which...
well, not, but...
No, absolutely not. And therefore, to some degree, we cannot appreciate the way that someone who converted in prison is treated by the community. We can't appreciate how that feels, nor can we speak about the pain that it must cause. But I can speak about my online encounters with these issues, my encounters from just hearing how the community speaks. In regards to what Shaikh Daniel said at the start, that there is this theory, there is this view that all converts must come from troubled backgrounds. I'm not going to lie. There must be something which is unique to the social background of most converts, at least, which causes them to reflect upon the situation they're in, causes them to be willing to look at Islam with an open mind, and particularly the Ahlul Bayt with an open mind, and embrace it, because we see that the status quo of the world today, particularly where I am in the UK, tends to be a youth which is fairly distant from religion, fairly distant from any meaningful search. In fact, most youth I know are interested in living their life to a maximable, pleasurable degree.
So
in the current period of time.
Utilitarian, essentially.
Exactly. Very utilitarian. Very thinking about here and now, thinking about how to make enough money so that they can retire, be rich, and continue to have fun in this life. And when it comes to questions such as God, you even try and bring it up, and it seems they want to run away from the discussion. So I've got to admit, there must be something particularly unique about the convert mindset. Now, something being unique about the convert mindset is not synonymous with there being something criminal, something strange, something devious with the convert mindset, which is sometimes the stereotype we have out there. And unfortunately, I've heard even from very prominent speakers rather derogatory comments made about converts in ways that they don't even perceive it as being derogatory. They might just make a passing comment such as, yeah, of course the guy's going to be a bit weird, you know, he's a convert. And
a while ago that would have surprised me. Sadly today it no longer does.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's very common. I've even, and I will not go into details as to who I heard this from, but when I was studying in the Hausa in London, he's not a staff member there, he was a visiting affiliate of the institute. He came and he was there over summer, so a friend of mine took him out for dinner, and he's very highly involved in one of the houses of the world, especially dealing with international students. And so I asked him, is it true, Sheikhana, that there is a massive spread or conversion to Shiism, particularly within continents like Africa and places like Thailand, where we know that there's been a mass conversion wave, so to speak, towards Shiism? And his response was something that I'm not sure if I was speaking to a Westerner, they would have known I'm speaking to a convert here. Let me just mince my words a bit and try and be polite about it. But I'm glad that his Eastern mentality prevents him from doing mujamala, as we would say in Arabic, or beautifying his view or glossing it over, because it helped me understand how he thinks about these things. He said no. And to be honest with you, you shouldn't be surprised about this, because, you know, it's quite strange for someone to want to leave their family values behind, and for someone to want to kind of betray their cultural identity. Now, sure, that's certainly one way to look at it. You can certainly view it as betraying a cultural identity and abandoning your family values. Or you could view it as a thirst for God's revelation and truth in the world. Now, I view it more as the latter. If you wish to view it as the former, that's fine, but you know, maybe you're in the wrong job if your job is to supervise foreign students in one of the world's largest houses. So the fact that we have this problem is one which needs to be addressed, particularly, as you said, problems of converts who came from more criminal backgrounds. And we must admit, look, in today's modern world, certainly social factors can influence the kind of way of life you choose to live. And if you're deprived of good education, if you're deprived of good opportunities to a standard decent human being's rights, for example, a good place to live, food on your table, clothes on your back, shelter over your head, supportive family, good schooling, the right to schooling, the right to an education without being judged and perceived as being someone who's going to do some kind of manual labor, and therefore we don't need to dedicate much time to his education. It's only natural that you will naturally seek out the ways to earn money according to your standards. And so if you're living in a ghetto in which crime is rampant, and one of the quick ways you can make money, one of the quick ways you can live a life that isn't one of humiliation is to carry out crime, then if you're a hot-headed youth, regardless of your ethnic or religious background, I'm sure that you most likely might lean towards that.
Well, I mean, we can even say, look, there are certainly compelling structural factors that limit opportunities and more or less funnel people towards a specific set of life options and away from another one. And I know we're going to have some skeptical viewers that say it's essentially all about individual choice and whatever else, to which I'd say, even if we accept that essentially it all boiled down to individual choice or responsibility, that people make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And this is part of the reason that you find humanity across the world has religion and engages in religious encounters, is for this idea that we make mistakes and that we seek forgiveness for those mistakes.
And this is one of the main
another
reasons
chance.
Why, according to Islamic theology, pure Islamic revealed theology, not the theologies created by man, there is a need for...
Or women in some cases.
Or the woman.
Yes.
There is a need for the divinely inspired, ma'soom, infallible figure who guides a fallible humanity towards the truth. And we believe that it is out of God's infinite grace towards us that He has given us this infallible figure through whom we can break the human problem of interpretation issues and all these other issues which the corrupted cults speaking in the name of Islam all suffer from.
You know, it's problematic, actually. When I was thinking about some convert issues last night, and I was watching one of the, must be like a Saudi channel or something, that was broadcasting on satellite, and it had an English segment, and this guy, you know, like the sort of typical Salafi-looking type, not that I have, you know me, historically, I prefer having a bigger beard as opposed to a shorter one, but it looked very clear when I switched the channel what I was about to see. It was going on with this thing about how the revelation first descended on the Prophet in the cave, and how he was really afraid, and he felt the crushing pressure, and all these other things, and then later he doesn't know if it was like from the devil or from God, or so even
we're not
these
surprised.
stories.
According to their story, Jibreel basically tried to squeeze the guy to death.
It's, mashallah, it's amazing. But this is also, if you even ask most Shi'i converts, the version of this story that they're going to be familiar with, you know, which is something, inshallah, we'll come back to in some more Ramadan-related episodes if we talk about the Quran's revelation, this kind of thing. But even on that level, you know, that sort of corruption creeps in from this other group that you're mentioning.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, as we were saying, we know that mankind are fallible. We know that we all make mistakes. And we know that whilst we admit there is free will, there are a plethora of social factors, a plethora of psychological factors, which will contribute towards people making certain decisions. And that's why we sometimes thank Allah Azza wa Jal that we were not there. For example, when they took the wilayah from Amir al-Mu'mineen, because we recognize that in this divine test, this imtihan al-ilahi, which was given to the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and I'll be coming back to them since we're on the topic of human fallibility. Many of them turned away. Many of them supported the dictator that came into power through a vile and vicious coup d'etat and left the religion of Islam.
Well, that's interesting actually though, because, you know, just touching on this, one of the reasons that people will say they're the most so concerned about converts in general, or about whether or not they come from troubled backgrounds, is that of course they'll leave the religion once they've entered into it. What upsets me the most about this particular thing, not to go too far off your point, but when that happens, when that assumption's made, it's part of a larger system of pressure that converts frequently face, to the point where if someone, God forbid, gets pressured from all of the sort of negative attitudes and community reactions they encounter into just giving up, because, I mean, the feeling is right that nobody in these communities wants me to be here.
Sure.
So why am I trying so hard to be? Then when they fall from that state, the community looks at this as more evidence that, of course, converts are not trustworthy, maybe, or that there's always some question about whether they'll stick to their Islam or whatever. Even when these communities, sometimes they come over, if you look to their parents or other people who came over, they came over to get away from Islam.
Sure.
In some cases, they're just now returning. That's, you know, sort of unimportant. But if a convert gets pushed into that situation over and over and over again, where they finally do leave, or they do stop practicing, or they make some big mistake,
Yeah.
then that's counted against them and is more evidence in favor of maintaining a skeptical position when it comes to converts, I think.
And it is exactly as you said, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, it's setting people up to fail, and then there's this sort of schadenfreude,
then
right?
Rejoicing in their
Exactly.
failure at the end of it, which is just a disgusting thing to do. And again, it's similar to, and I'm not going to dwell into this view, I'll just mention it as a passing comment. As we mentioned, converts who marry into the community, because they're already given such a hard ride for being converts, again, for similar issues. There's a cultural difference. Who knows, he might leave a religion. And then when, due to this poor convert, he or she receives so much pressure from the community, they just flip out and lose it. It's like, oh, see, we told you, convert.
Instead of them making more of an effort, and I don't want to overly generalize, but I'm saying the people who do this, instead of, they could be more productive by making an effort to engage that person in the community rather than waiting for them to fail and sort of helping create the conditions for that. Now, this is not to say that that's what happened with those people who abandoned the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salam. In this case, it was for, unfortunately, much more devious reasons in a number of cases. But yeah, you're right. There is sort of, we could say, generously anyway, a sizable portion of those people, they just sort of failed to rise to the occasion at a very minimum, you know.
Well, so back to our issue, we see that the brothers who have maybe done time in prison, maybe have come from a more gangster background. There is almost, especially since, let's be quite honest here, immigrant Muslims, and particularly, we alhamdulillah happen to be blessed in Shaykh community. We have Khawajas, we have Iranians, we have Iraqis. In certain countries they go to, they tend to be quite prosperous. They tend to be quite economically successful.
Particularly in the US.
And as a result, naturally, when one is economically successful, in order to maintain that success, especially if you're in the business world and you have to work with non-Muslims, you have to maintain a certain class image as well. What do I mean by class image? You have to basically be setting yourself up as basically the upper middle class.
Yeah.
And the class system is very much still alive in the UK to some degree. And as a result, when you have a class system mentality, if someone comes in with a perceived ex-criminal background, you're not going to want such individuals bringing down the status of your community, nor are you going to want your children hanging around with such individuals. And what we find is, this is just based upon a vicious, disgusting stereotype. You know, if we were to carry out some research into everyone's family trees, everyone's previous background, well, not only would we discover that some people are claiming lineages they don't really have, but more importantly, I'm sure we would also discover that numerous people within their family trees do have individuals who maybe had done something which society was not happy with at that time, rightly or wrongly. I'm not going to make a moral judgment on these issues. For who are we to make moral judgments? God will make the moral judgments.
Inshallah, we have to cut to break for a minute. Please join us on the conversation. You can email us at the contact information posted on screen. We'll be back in a moment. Thank you for joining us and welcome back to the conversation. When we left off, we were discussing, or continuing to discuss rather, the issue of convert identity, and in particular how this plays when we enter along with it the subject of converts who come from troubled backgrounds or other things like this. And I think when we left off, Shaikh, you were talking about if we look into some other people's backgrounds, probably we'd find similar things as well. Of course, communities, maybe they have the decency not to do that kind of thing with each other. It's just more fair game when it comes to
absolutely right.
People who've entered the religion.
As I said, we do have certainly a class system within our community. Now, I don't blame them.
Caste system, depending on the
a caste system, depending
community.
on which race we're talking, which community we are talking about. And again, when we say that, we're talking about a general phenomenon, and we're not restricting it to every specific individual of that community, just to make clear. For we don't want to be guilty of what is often done with converts and what we're condemning here. And indeed, it's even wrong to make generalizations to some degree, so we do apologize. But we're talking about a current reality which needs to be dealt with. Namely, as you said, we have the decency not to look into people's family backgrounds, because we know that we could find, certainly within some generation of that family, someone who had done something according to society that was condemned. Now the question here is, because we have the decency not to look this up, what kind of decency does someone have when not only have they probed and asked this poor new convert for his background, but once they're given the story, which is a very private, personal one, they use this story against the convert. Oh, you know what I've heard? He converted when he was in prison. What was he in prison for? Yeah. You know, robbery. What kind of guy is this? True.
So you mean as opposed to treat the idea of kitman, right, or of having some kind of, that your job is to protect your brother or sister's privacy, particularly those things that they may find either, not necessarily, even if it's something they own, you know, they take ownership of, it's not like an embarrassing thing, but it doesn't mean you need to then spread around their business around the community.
Sure. Allah Azza wa Jal is Satar al-Ayub, is someone that covers the deficiencies of other people, and hence we hope that we as mankind would also have similar traits. Now, given that these converts have opened up, told the community their stories, what kind of backgrounds they were coming from, and often they don't do so with a degree of pride. They're not standing there saying, I was a hustler and I'm proud of it, or I was a pimp and I'm proud of it.
Maybe in some cases.
Inshallah ta'ala, we're talking about the Shia community here. We're talking about the Shia community here. And I don't believe it tends to be an issue of pride in the Shia community. Of course, in other communities where you might have a companion of the Prophet who
I was just going to say,
was in a similar game, and it might be a sense of pride for some. But back to the issue here. They tell these stories in order to explain the degree of social and spiritual transformation which is brought about as a result of Islam. Now, our community chooses to be harsh. I will say that this is partially based upon a deficient understanding of our theology. What do I mean by that? Once your guides are infallible ma'sumin, sometimes because you want to take no one else as your guide, you expect to judge people based on the ma'sumin's lifestyle, namely a perfect and flawless one. But as you said in that beautiful narration you've quoted several times on this show, where the Imam's companions start speaking about another group of Imam's followers and saying, look at them, they are deficient in this and that and this. How can we socialize with them? And you told me...
the Imam says basically, you know, how do you think your spirituality stacks up against ours? They said, not very much. He said, then how would you like it if we did tabarra from you, if we were away from you, and this kind of thing because of that?
So, here we have it. The Imam is making clear that no one is to be judged up against the Ma'sumin. So, who do we have as other role models? Just to bring this into perspective so people are aware of what the truth is according to our religion. In the book Al-Kishi's Rijal, which is a book of rawayat, it's not a book of, it's not a dictionary.
It's biographical information.
Exactly. It's a book of rawayat, it's a book of history. We have a narration in which it says that the good companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, after the fall of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, namely the demise, the istishhad of the Prophet, the martyrdom of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were three: Miqdad, Salman, and Abi Dhar. And it further says that with the exception of Miqdad, or no one else remained firmly upon the straight path. So, 120,000 companions. From them, you have three after the death of the Prophet. From them,
generously
you have one.
four, according to some narrations, and then even then, the fourth one tends to change periodically.
Sure, but from that, you're left with one, who is Miqdad. Now it's asked, what was the crime of Salman? Rahmatullah alayhi wa ridwanullah alayhi, Salman al-Muhammadi, who we reverts hope, converts rather, sorry for that slip up. I was going to say, come on. Hope we can, and we Muslims in general, we Shia hope that we can become worthy of the dust underneath the feet of Salman. Salman was someone who, the narration states, when the oppressors at Saqifa took Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam by the neck and dragged him by a rope in which they had hoped to force him to give bay'ah, force him to give allegiance to the criminal inspiration of tyrants like Saddam Hussein and other
many rulers in the Middle East, actually.
Killers like Hosni Mubarak. Salman saw this occurring and thought to himself, well, the Imam has the Ism al-A'zam. The Imam has the greatest name of Allah. Exactly. He has wilayat takwiniyah. He will liberate himself from this situation and he'll cause the earth to swallow up all these tyrants. And when this doesn't happen, because Imam Ali alayhi salam had been commanded by the Prophet, unless you find 40 individuals, you do nothing. Salman began to doubt.
But it was even just, it's described as, it's like, it was not like he was doubting big time about the Imam or something. It was just a slight uncertainty that he had. And for someone of that level, that's actually kind of...
This is a major sin for someone of that level, according to how the Rawayat explain it. So, as a result, Salman is faced with a nasty lash from the enemy's side, which leaves him with a grotesque mark, which the narration implies would not have been left if it was just a normal strike of a whip. And Amir al-Mu'mineen tells him, "Oh Salman, this mark is just to remind you the consequences of doubting in our wilayah. Namely, how great will the fires of the hellfire be, O Salman, if such doubts are perpetuated and you leave our wilayah." So we see individuals like Salman. And again, how many of us on a day-to-day basis read the dodgy rawaya? Or rawaya, when I say dodgy rawaya, astaghfirullah, may Allah purify my tongue from making such slips. I mean a rawaya which is difficult to understand.
Yeah.
And we might think, oh, is it possible that the Imam could do this? What kind of Imam is this? We seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan and such disgusting thoughts about the Imams. For when we do not understand something, we need to ask the people of knowledge. And we sometimes think like this. So some people might say this is relatively minor. But someone of Salman's status, who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said about him that Salman is from us and has resulted in us often referring to him as Salman al-Muhammadi. So the narration therefore goes on to speak about Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. Now Abu Dharr al-Ghifari is an interesting case because not only is he someone that's reached this high status, and I'm about to quote what the narrations say is a blemish of his after Islam, but anyone that knows his pre-Islamic biography also would know that he is from a gangster background. He is from a pre-Islamic warring tribe background, which is why often when people found out which tribe Salman was from, they'd be quite afraid.
Abu Dharr.
Abu Dharr was from, they'd be quite afraid. For the Bani Ghaffar were known for their warring...
Like highway robbery.
They were highway bandits, brigands essentially is what we would refer to them as. And so people were often afraid of Abu Dharr, and it to some degree explains his fiery nature. The narrations state that on the day of Saqifa, again, Amir al-Mu'mineen had warned Abu Dharr, you're going to need to control that tongue of yours. You're going to need to control that fiery condemnation that you have. And we understand why. Naturally, you need, I'll explain my analogy later, but you need someone to be under the control of the Imam always. And as a result, Amir al-Mu'mineen condemns Abu Dharr for the fact that he kept opening his mouth and eventually got exiled to the area where he did, and
but condemn in the sense not of...
As in, it would have been better to listen to the Imam and remain under his guidance. It's not condemning as in he committed a vicious sin, he's going to hell now. No.
But it was, I needed your support.
Absolutely.
And now you're not going to be able there to give that to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we see that the companions of Imams even had such issues. Now what I was trying to say about Abu Dharr is, Abu Dharr was a true Arabian stallion for Tashayyu. He was a wild stallion for Tashayyu, someone who fought against the oppressor with his tongue, someone who condemned the oppressor, and someone who really exposed the oppressor. And Abu Dharr is a revolutionary role model for many. But at the same time, he's a stallion, as I said. What's the problem with a wild stallion? It's not tamed. Yeah. It can't be tamed. It can't be shaped. It can't be bridled. And that to some degree is Abu Dharr's problem, which is something which the Ahlul Bayt have recognized, but at the same time we say Rahmatullah alayhi, and we again hope that we can one day reach the status of someone as great as Abu Dharr. So we have all these companions from amongst the Imam's early companions who have these defects. Another case, let me just, now this is going to shock some of the viewers beyond belief here, but everything we say can be backed up with the sources and backed up by the statements of some of the highest respected ulama known to Tashayyu. Last year, we heard about the destruction of the grave of Hujr ibn Uday. Hujr ibn Uday, of course, being one of the companions of the Prophet, as is accepted within Shiism, and the deviated groups from Islam say that he was not necessarily a companion, but he was a tabi'i. But in any case, we acknowledge who Hujr ibn Uday was, someone martyred by the tyrant, inheritor of tyranny, Muawiyah. Hujr ibn Uday, when we went out and condemned the fact that his grave was attacked in this way, we condemned the fact that they did this to someone who was such a staunch supporter of Amir al-Mu'mineen. What do we find Hujr ibn Uday did on the day of the peace treaty of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam? We find that history reports that Hujr ibn Uday came up to Imam al-Hasan when Imam al-Hasan signed that peace treaty with the vicious inheritor of tyranny, Muawiyah, and said, "Oh, I'm ashamed today to call myself a Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen. I'm ashamed to be one of your Shia." And he basically referred to him in a manner which was insulting, according to all accounts. So, we talk about converts having certain blemishes, maybe having a tendency to be weak in the faith. But here we're talking about a great companion of a Prophet, someone raised under Amir al-Mu'mineen again, someone given martyrdom in the path of Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is still someone who, due to his human side, due to his human defects, is able to insult an Imam of his time and question the wisdom of an Imam of his time. Now we condemn him outright for this. And in fact, most of our theologians have said the reason he was probably given such a vile, not a vile, but a vicious means of being killed in the way of Allah Azza wa Jal was probably a means to atone for the sin he made of questioning the Imam of his time. But my point is, where is this poor convert who's got this poor background? And where are individuals like Hujr ibn Uday? If they can make such small mistakes, well, in reality they're big mistakes, and imagine anyone such as you or I would make them. We'd be headed straight for hell.
But I mean, the difference, we lose control of our emotions, you know.
Absolutely.
This is something people in general do, I think, and I guess it's something that's the human aspect for converts maybe sometimes is not always as forgiven as it would be for others when it comes to mistakes or slip-ups or other things like that. And this is even with converts who have not stumbled a lot, you know.
Sure.
If we imagine some who've made bigger slips, who've either sort of, we could say, fallen off the spiritual wagon at one time or another, and this is something that they're particularly prone to earlier in the process of still learning their religion, and sometimes you get to a point where it all seems like too much, you know. So if, for instance, a convert, astaghfirullah, they return to drinking or something like that, or womanizing, or other things like that, that were habits that they consciously changed in their identity when they converted and have tried to reform themselves, but they slip up, we have to hope that the community is waiting to pick them up and not to lynch them. Now, in my experience, I think a lot of communities are willing to fall into a supportive role. However, it's also possible that they may feel like this particular thing is only an issue with converts or other things like this, when in fact we know, even using the example that I gave, for instance, of alcohol use or other things, that this is certainly not something restricted to converts, but in fact also many like sort of cultural Muslims and others.
Sure.
Some Sufi types as well, I guess. So we don't have a whole lot of time left. I think maybe somewhere in the order of 5 minutes or so.
Sure.
But in the remaining time that we do have, what can we say in terms of the way that converts' background should be treated or approached by community members, or, you know, how much deference or sensitivity should be displayed? Because we also don't want to put converts on a pedestal to some extent and say
No,
that
absolutely
we're
not.
exceptional
Absolutely
people.
not.
We need to be treated in some way that's, you know, much more demanding of respect or something than other people in the community.
I believe that the first thing we need to do again is, here I'm not going to talk about referring to a prophetic model, but understanding the whole cosmology and worldview of Islam. We as Shias, we as Muslims believe that Allah Azza wa Jal is a personal God who cares about humanity, and throughout history has sent us divine guides. 124,000 prophets and numerous awsiya. In the case of our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa 12 Imams after him, and his blessed daughter Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, who also serves as a hujjah from Allah Azza wa Jal. We believe that they came with one mission and one mission alone, namely to liberate mankind from the worship of the self, worship of idols, the worship of things other than Allah Azza wa Jal, to call people to their wilaya, which is to understand Tawheed in its purest fashion, namely that the saints of God have the right to represent God and give us God's commandments, and again, through doing so, save us from the fearful destination that is Jahannam, the hellfire. As a result, we believe that the invitation to Jannah, to enter into a loving relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal, to enter into a loving relationship with the Imam of your time, and to enter into the system of wilaya with your Imam, and not other understandings of wilaya, Sufi saints and what have you, but pure wilaya, as mentioned in the rawayat, is the aim of all of humanity. The Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam were not sent to a specific part of the world. They were not sent to Khojistan or to the Iraqi parts of the world. They were sent to humanity at large, and we hope that humanity at large would be able to accept them. And in understanding this, in understanding that we who claim to be the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we need to understand that they have given us certain prohibitions and certain commandments. One of the commandments is Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. Another of the commandments is to go out and call people to the way of your Lord. Now, might I say that in the Quran it says to do so with hikmah and in the way which is best. So to not do so in a vile, disgusting way. Because we believe that Ahlul Bayt are for all of humanity, we need to understand that who are we as followers of Ahlul-Bayt, as human beings who are trying to reconnect in our relationship with the Ahlul-Bayt and rebuild our relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal, which has been severed through our disobedience and sins. Who are we to condemn anyone for any sin they've made? Who are we to condemn someone that's been in prison, someone who's been a drunkard, someone who's been a pimp, someone who's been a hustler, or any of these things, if we ourselves admit that we were once people who committed sins, people who did not care about our relationship, but at one point had the intention to change that and cultivate the relationship we have with Allah Azza wa Jal. And as long as we recognize that the poor convert has come to us seeking help, saying that I recognize that my past has been bad, and I've come here with an intention to change, with an intention to accept Allah Azza wa Jal. It might take me some time. I have some certain habits which are hard to break down, but please, I'm coming here asking for your help. Then we hope that we should open up our arms widely and embrace him into the community and give him the best opportunity we can give him to become a decent person. Now, we can only do the best we can. We give him the same opportunity we would have given anyone else in that situation. If we see he is perpetually failing and is perpetually causing harm to others, that might be a time when we start saying that, okay, enough is enough. But unless he causes harm to others, if the only person he is harming is himself, then we try to help him to the best of our ability.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this episode of The Conversation. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can email us at the contact information provided on screen, and inshallah you'll continue to join us for other episodes. May God's peace and blessings be upon our Holy Prophet Muhammad and upon his pure progeny. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.